Okay, Catherine mentioned these joint planning cells, and these are really an effort within USAID to bring our humanitarian and development sides together. For a number of reasons, some of which I'm not even fully aware, through the years we've become very bifurcated in USAID. And I always go back to the Kenya example because I was actually working on the humanitarian side there. Excuse me. We basically took, not strategically, but the default position was we did development over here in one place, and we responded to emergencies over here in another for years and years and years. And this is an effort to bring those two processes together to recognize that we're continually responding to humanitarian crises and to make development investments in building resilience to reduce these persistent emergency caseloads and these persistent crises. The effort has worked across the many bureaus in USAID, food security, global health, and a number of offices within those bureaus, and has involved joint analysis, planning, and funding. We've really tried to look at humanitarian assistance as a platform upon which development assistance can build in some of these places, not unlike Karamoja. Excuse me, I'm gonna have to grab some water. The flight's catching up with me, I think.
I'll sing a song. No, I'm kidding. But what I will point out is that joint analysis is completely revolutionary in aid. As Greg was saying, it's weird, but we've done separate humanitarian disaster relief assessments, completely different than our analysis of development, which, as all of you know, especially in places like Congo, my favorite example today, it's senseless to do that because they're so interrelated.
Okay, I'm back online, at least partially. Okay, so using this sustained humanitarian assistance as a platform upon which development assistance can build is a key tenet of what's come out of this joint planning process. I think we only need to look at Karamoja, a place where there's been sustained humanitarian assistance for a number of decades, to see that that is an opportunity, there is a platform there. To the extent humanitarian actors have leaned into the development space, do things like asset creation, etc., there really is something there to build on. And quite often we found it within USAID and bringing different partners together, there's a dismissal. Development partners dismissing the work of humanitarians, humanitarians dismissing the work of development. So getting over those hurdles has been a huge, huge achievement of these joint planning cells, at least internally. And then this last point, firmly situating resilience on the development agenda. Okay, next slide. On this map, the brown is the entire arid and drylands territory. Our new investments are focused on the areas with the diagonal slash marks. So we looked at a number of criteria that are actually spelled out now in the policy in doing that, basically looking at measures of chronic vulnerability, including the persistent or the sort of sustained humanitarian assistance as a proxy for persistent humanitarian caseloads. We looked at comparative advantage, where we had programs we could build on. We looked at economic opportunity, where the strategic trade corridors, etc., to come up with this strategic focus in Ethiopia and Kenya. Next slide. We did a similar, somewhat more refined analysis in looking at the Sahel. We didn't have the heavily invested USAID programs in these two countries. We did have what are called Food for Peace development programs that worked for a number of years. And we anchored our new investments on these areas in the marginal ag and agro-pastoralist zone. I think one of the more interesting things that came out of the analysis in the Sahel was that it wasn't really about absolute level of deprivation, which you might find in the northern part of Niger in terms of dry lands, etc., water scarcity. It was variability. So variability was the source of vulnerability. The inability to predict what was happening next, and the fact that seasons were changing and planting seasons were now 3 weeks later are unpredictable, made these communities particularly vulnerable. We also did take a look at population density in terms of how much return we're getting on these investments. It's very difficult when there's 2 people per square kilometer versus a more intensified population.